It all started with a cough. Not just any cough, but a wet, guttural rasp that echoed unnervingly down Elm Street. I was in my third-floor apartment, trying to fix a leaky faucet, when I heard the first screams. At first, I thought it was just another bar fight spilling out onto the street, but the screams kept coming, and they were raw, animalistic terror. Peeking through the grimy window, my blood ran cold. Down below, Mrs. Henderson, who always had a kind word and a plate of cookies for me, was hunched over Mr. Peterson, her teeth buried deep in his neck. He was thrashing, but it wasn't like a normal struggle. It was wrong. His limbs twitched erratically, and then, impossibly, his eyes snapped open, milky white and vacant, and he lunged at the closest person, a young woman caught in the chaos. It was like watching a movie, a nightmare unfolding in real time, but this was my street, my city, and there was no pause button. The initial shock gave way to a nauseating panic. I slammed the window shut, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. People were running, a stampede of pure fear, but some weren't running away. They were shambling, groaning, their bodies contorted, their eyes fixed on the living with an insatiable hunger. I saw a man, his face a mask of horror, try to reason with one of them, only to be torn apart before my eyes. The air filled with the stench of decay and something metallic, like old blood. The symphony of screams and growls was overwhelming, a perversion of everything I knew. My mind reeled. What was happening? Was this some kind of virus? A plague? The sheer, brutal savagery was beyond comprehension. For the next few hours, I barricaded myself in, stuffing furniture against the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely move. Every creak of the building, every distant moan, sent jolts of adrenaline through me. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, but the thought of venturing out, of facing those things, was paralyzing. I thought of Leo, my younger brother. He was at school when this started. School. The thought of him trapped in a place like this was a knife twisting in my gut. The faucet I'd been trying to fix seemed like an absurd, distant memory. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my apartment, and the gnawing dread that I was utterly, terrifyingly alone in this collapsing reality. What would you do if you were me, holed up with no idea of what was happening, and someone you loved was out there? This is my last recording, my last message. If anyone hears this, please, subscribe if you can, and leave a like. It's all I can think of to do. The static on the old shortwave radio crackled and died. Dead air. Just like everything else. I'd spent another day fiddling with the dials, hoping for a voice, any voice, to cut through the silence. Nothing. The city outside remained a hulking, gray beast, silent and unmoving. No cars, no distant sirens, not even a dog barking. It was as if the whole world had just stopped. I ate the last of the canned beans, the metallic taste a grim reminder of my dwindling supplies. My reflection in the grimy window showed a gaunt stranger, eyes wide with a fear that had become a permanent resident. I tried the phone again. That dial tone, once a symbol of connection, now mocked me with its persistent, empty hum. I imagined her out there, somewhere. Was she safe? Was she even still, real? The thought was a physical ache, a tightening in my chest. I traced the condensation on the windowpane, sketching her face from memory. It was getting harder to recall the details, the way her hair curled, the exact shade of her eyes. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. I forced it down, focusing on the task at hand, whatever that task was. Survival? Waiting? For what? I found a notebook and a pencil stub. Maybe writing it all down, getting it out of my head, would help. It felt important, like a duty. This wasn't just about me anymore. If someone, someday, found this place, they needed to know. They needed to know what it felt like to be the last one awake, the only one left to witness the end, or the beginning, or whatever this was. I wrote about the quiet. The suffocating, heavy quiet. I wrote about the emptiness that seemed to stretch on forever, not just in the streets, but inside me. I paused, staring at the page. What was I even trying to say? Was there a point to any of this? The radio remained stubbornly silent. The city outside was a monument to stillness. I felt a strange sort of calm descend, a resignation that was almost peaceful. Perhaps the answer wasn't in the static, or the dead phones. Perhaps the answer was just, in the quiet. I looked out the window again, not at my reflection, but at the vast, indifferent sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. It was beautiful, in a desolate, final way. I closed the notebook, the pencil falling from my nerveless fingers. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was just, there. And so was I. Honestly, I thought it was some kind of mass hysteria at first. Daniel, my neighbor from down the street, the one with the perpetually stained t-shirts and the annoying yappy dog. He was banging on my door, eyes wide, screaming about Mrs. Henderson. Not just screaming, mind you, but gurgling. I opened the door a crack, just enough to see. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just Mrs. Henderson, and it wasn't just Daniel. The street, usually so quiet on a Tuesday afternoon, was a charnel house. Daniel, or what was left of him, was trying to gnaw through Mrs. Henderson's arm, which was already dangling by a thread of sinew. Her eyes, those milky, vacant things, were fixed on nothing, but her mouth was still working, a wet, guttural moan escaping. And there were others. People I knew, people I'd waved to, people I'd bought milk from, shambling, lurching, their limbs moving with that awful, jerky motion. Their skin was wrong. Mottled, gray, some of it sloughing off like wet paper. I slammed the door shut, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The sounds outside, they were horrific. Screams, yes, but also those wet, tearing noises, the sickening crunch of bone. I remember stumbling backward, hitting the wall. Daniel's yappy dog started barking like mad, then a wet thump and silence. I didn't want to imagine what happened to that dog. My mind just fractured. I couldn't process it. This wasn't a movie. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. The fear was a cold, heavy blanket that crushed my lungs. I crouched down by the door, listening. Every creak of the house, every distant moan, sent shivers down my spine. My first instinct, I guess, was to hide. To pretend it wasn't happening. But the banging started on my door again. Not Daniel this time. Something else. Slower, more deliberate. A scraping, a heavy, dull thud. They knew I was here. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a cast iron skillet, and backed away from the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I looked around my living room, suddenly seeing it through a new lens. Furniture. Potential weapons. But also, potential traps. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, usually a comforting sound, now felt like a countdown to my own demise. I could feel my sanity fraying at the edges. I was alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone with the monsters outside, and the creeping terror inside. The old oak table, usually laden with mail and discarded cups, now looked like a barricade. I could shove it against the door, buy myself a few more minutes. The heavy armchair, maybe I could swing it. My mind raced, cataloging every object, its weight, its potential for blunt force trauma. It was a grim inventory, one I never thought I'd need to take. The silence in the house was thick, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart. I strained my ears, trying to catch any sound from beyond the walls, any indication of movement, any hint that they were still out there, waiting. A scraping sound, faint but distinct, came from the kitchen. My breath hitched. They were closer. I backed away from the living room door, my eyes fixed on the hallway leading to the kitchen. It was a narrow passage, offering no real cover. I fumbled for the fireplace poker, its cold iron a small comfort in my clammy hand. It felt ridiculously inadequate, a child's toy against whatever was out there. The scraping came again, louder this time, followed by a low guttural groan. It was a sound that scraped against my nerves, primal and chilling. I had to move. Staying put was a death sentence. My gaze flickered towards the back door, leading out to the overgrown garden. It was a risk, going outside, but the thought of being cornered in the house, with no escape, was even worse. I crept towards the kitchen doorway, poker held out in front of me. The air felt heavy, charged with an unseen menace. My reflection in the darkened window of the kitchen door showed a pale, wild-eyed stranger, a ghost of my former self. I pushed the door open a crack, peering into the gloom. The kitchen was dark, save for a sliver of moonlight that cut through a gap in the blinds. The source of the scraping became apparent. A chair had been knocked over, its legs splayed awkwardly on the linoleum. Nothing else seemed out of place, at first glance. But then I saw it. A dark, viscous stain spreading on the floor near the back door. It wasn't there before. My stomach churned. Whatever had made that noise, it had been inside. Or perhaps it was still here. I scanned the shadows, every corner, my senses on high alert. The silence returned, more oppressive than before. It was a waiting game, and I was losing. The ticking of the clock seemed to mock my fear, each second a reminder of my vulnerability. I needed a plan, something more than just reacting to every noise. But my mind, still reeling from the initial shock, struggled to form coherent thoughts. The instinct to survive was strong, but it was battling with a paralyzing dread. I retreated back into the living room, the poker still gripped tight, my knuckles white. The back door was a potential escape, but the kitchen was now a minefield. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I strained my ears, listening for any shift, any creak that wasn't my own. Nothing. Maybe they were gone. Maybe they'd decided it wasn't worth the trouble. A sliver of hope, so thin it was almost transparent, flickered in my chest. But I knew better. This wasn't the kind of thing that just went away. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic thumping in my chest. I had to move. Staying here, frozen like this, was a death sentence. The poker felt useless, a flimsy shield against whatever was out there. I needed to assess the situation, find a way out. The back door. It was still the best bet, but the kitchen was between me and it. Creeping towards the kitchen doorway, I flattened myself against the wall. My eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of movement. Shadows danced in the corners, playing tricks on my mind. Every shadow looked like a threat. I took another tentative step, my bare feet silent on the cool linoleum. The air in the kitchen was still, carrying the faint, metallic scent of something I couldn't quite place. Blood? No, not that. Something else. I reached the threshold, peering into the dimly lit space. The door to the back porch was in sight, about 10 feet away. Between me and it, however, was an overturned chair, a scattering of broken glass, and a dark, viscous pool spreading slowly from under the refrigerator. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a break-in. My gaze swept the room again, landing on the pantry door. It was slightly ajar. A soft, rhythmic scraping sound emanated from within. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone in the house. Whatever was out there, it was still here. And it was in the pantry. My mind raced. Fight. Run. The back door was so close, but the pantry felt like the heart of whatever was happening. I couldn't just leave. I had to know. Gripping the poker tighter, I slowly, silently, pushed the pantry door open a little further. A pair of wide, terrified eyes stared back at me from the darkness, followed by a choked sob. It was the little girl from next door, huddled in the corner, her face streaked with dirt and tears. But it wasn't her fear that made my own fear intensify. It was the fact that she was staring, not at me, but at something behind me, something that was now standing in the kitchen doorway, blocking my path to the back door. It was tall, gaunt, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural, malevolent light. Okay, so, imagine this. I was just trying to grab some supplies from the corner store, you know. Just a normal Tuesday. Then, all hell broke loose. The streets, usually buzzing with people, just erupted. Screaming, panic, and then I saw it. A woman, or what used to be a woman, lunging at a guy. Her teeth were bared, her eyes were sunken and vacant, and the way she tore into him, it was like watching a wild animal, but worse. It was primal, savage. My first instinct was just pure, gut-wrenching terror. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I saw another person, then another, their movements jerky, unnatural. They weren't people anymore. They were just, moving with this horrible, relentless hunger. I scrambled back, tripping over a discarded shopping cart, the sound echoing way too loudly in the sudden, horrifying silence that fell after the initial chaos. Behind me, I heard a wet, guttural sound, like someone struggling to breathe, and then a sickening crunch. I didn't dare turn around. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing, what was happening. This wasn't some movie, this was real, and it was happening now. My heart was hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I finally managed to push myself up, my hands shaking. The corner store owner, old Mr. Henderson, was usually so jovial. Now, he was a hunched figure in the doorway, his eyes vacant, a trickle of blood running from his chin. He turned his head slowly, his gaze landing on me with that same empty stare. I didn't wait. I bolted. I ran like I'd never run before, adrenaline pumping through me. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every distant noise sent a jolt of fear through my system. I ran through back alleys, past overturned cars, and the stench of something foul hung heavy in the air. I saw more of them, shambling, groaning, their bodies twisted and mangled. It was a nightmare made flesh, and I was trapped in it. The sheer helplessness, the knowledge that there was no rhyme or reason to this, was almost worse than the fear of being caught. It was just, pure, unadulterated chaos, and I was utterly alone. The sound of scraping metal echoed from further down the street, a jarring noise that made my teeth ache. I pressed myself against a grimy brick wall, trying to disappear into the shadows. A few of them shuffled by, their vacant eyes scanning the darkness, but thankfully, they didn't seem to notice me. It was a close call, too close. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had to find a safer place, somewhere I could think, maybe even figure out what was going on. The main roads were a death trap, swarming with them. These back streets, while dirty and full of hidden dangers, seemed to offer a sliver of a chance. I moved cautiously, peeking around corners, my senses on high alert. Every creak of a loose shutter, every distant moan, sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through me. I spotted a fire escape on the side of a darkened building. It looked rusty and unstable, but it was a way up, a chance to get off the street. With a grunt, I grabbed onto the cold metal and started to climb. The ladder groaned under my weight, each rung a test of its strength and my own. My hands were raw by the time I reached the top, but I made it. The rooftop offered a slightly better vantage point. From up here, I could see the scale of the disaster. More of them were wandering the streets below, a slow, relentless tide. Smoke was rising from a few areas in the distance, suggesting fires that had either been started or hadn't been put out. The city, usually a beacon of light and noise, was now a landscape of despair and decay. There was no sign of anyone else, no emergency vehicles, no organized response. It was as if the entire world had just stopped. I needed water, and maybe something to eat. My throat was dry, and my stomach was starting to gnaw at itself. Looking around, I saw a few windows that looked like they might lead into accessible buildings. One, in particular, seemed to be on the ground floor of a low-rise structure, maybe a shop or an office. It was a gamble, but staying exposed on the rooftop wasn't an option for long. Slipping back down the fire escape, I made my way towards the building. The alleyway leading to it was narrow and even darker than the others. I could hear a faint, rhythmic thudding coming from inside the building. It was unsettling. I hesitated for a moment, but the thought of dehydration pushed me forward. I needed to find supplies, and this was the best lead I had. The door to the building was partially ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges squealing in protest. The interior was dim, filled with the smell of dust and something sweet, almost sickly. The thudding sound was louder now, and I could see a figure in the distance, hunched over something on the floor. I crept further inside, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The figure didn't react. As I got closer, I saw it was a woman, her back to me, her shoulders shaking. The sweet smell was stronger now, emanating from a spilled crate of what looked like some kind of preserved fruit. The thudding sound was rhythmic, coming from her. She was banging her head against the floor. Panic set in. Was she injured? Mad? I called out softly, "Hello." Her head snapped up, and I saw her face. It was gaunt, eyes wide and hollow, smeared with dirt. She scrambled backward, not away from me, but towards the wall, her movements jerky and unnatural. She wasn't just sick, she was terrified. "Go away," she croaked, her voice raw and raspy. "You can't be here. It's not safe." "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Are you hurt?" She just shook her head, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting something to leap from the shadows. "They'll find you. They always find everyone." I scanned the room again. Nothing seemed out of place, just dust, the spilled fruit, and the woman. The thudding had stopped. I needed water, but this woman was clearly not in a state to help me. She was a broken thing. I considered leaving her, but the thought felt wrong. "Who will find me?" I pressed. "Who are they?" She finally met my gaze, and for a moment, a flicker of something like recognition, or maybe just shared despair, crossed her face. "The ones who want to keep things quiet. The ones who made us like this." She gestured vaguely to herself, to the room, to everything. "This place, it's a trap. The sweetness, it makes you forget. Makes you slow. Makes you obedient." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Obedient? I looked at the spilled fruit again. It wasn't just preserved, it was some kind of drugged confection. And the thudding, was that her trying to fight it? Trying to stay awake? "I need water," I said, my voice a little more urgent now. "Do you know where I can find any?" She just stared, uncomprehending, or perhaps unwilling to engage with the mundane problem of thirst when her own reality was so much more terrifying. I couldn't force her. It was clear she was too far gone. I backed away slowly, my gaze lingering on her. She started rocking back and forth, a low hum escaping her lips. The sweetness in the air suddenly felt oppressive, a cloying blanket. I had to leave. The risk of staying here, exposed and without answers, was too great. I turned and walked back towards the partially open door, leaving the woman to her self-inflicted rhythm, the sickly sweet scent of temptation clinging to the air. The desert was a harsh mistress, but at least its dangers were honest. This place, this was something else entirely. Thank you for joining me on this journey. As we conclude, I hope these accounts have resonated with you and underscored the vital importance of preparedness. The world, as we've seen, can shift in an instant, and a proactive mindset is your greatest ally. Remember, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, remaining calm is paramount. Panic clouds judgment and leads to mistakes. Take a deep breath, assess your surroundings, and focus on the immediate, achievable steps. Consider Ilara's story, where a seemingly idyllic, yet subtly unsettling, retreat turned into a desperate flight. The seductive allure of isolation, the promise of escape from the very dangers we've discussed, ultimately masked a far more insidious threat. Her initial comfort in the quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos she'd left behind, was a fragile shield. The gradual realization that the source of this unnatural peace was predatory, not benevolent, highlights how readily appearances can deceive. Her decision to trust her instincts, to recognize the discordant notes in the symphony of tranquility, saved her from a fate far worse than any open conflict. It's a potent reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous enemies are those who offer false comfort. Then there's Marcus, whose meticulous preparation in his underground sanctuary was almost his undoing. He had contingency plans for nearly everything: water purification, long-term food storage, even a robust communication system. Yet, the unforeseen event, a cascading collapse of the very infrastructure that supported his meticulously crafted world, presented a challenge he hadn't fully anticipated. His struggle to adapt when his primary systems failed, forcing him to improvise with limited resources in an unfamiliar environment above ground, demonstrates that no plan is foolproof. His resilience, however, lay not just in his initial preparations, but in his ability to pivot, to re-evaluate his situation with a clear head when his established order crumbled. He learned that true survival often hinges on adaptability. As a general survival tip, always maintain a diverse skill set. Knowing how to purify water is excellent, but so is basic first aid, navigation without a compass, and even simple knot tying. The more tools you have in your mental toolbox, the more situations you can effectively navigate. Think of it as building your personal resilience, making yourself less reliant on any single piece of equipment or knowledge. Ultimately, the true strength lies within. Cultivate a mind that can remain steady when chaos surrounds you. Observe, analyze, and act with deliberation. These moments, the ones that test our very core, are also the moments where we discover our true capacity for endurance. I encourage you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. What lessons have you drawn from these accounts? And please, consider subscribing for more insights into navigating challenging times. Your continued engagement is invaluable.